So yeah, I don't know why I didn't mention this earlier. Stupid me. What's up, kind people of YouTube? My name's Ahmed, and welcome back to yet another review or recommendation. Should I just start calling these recommendations because I'm actually not reviewing it. I'm recommending the show, and I feel that you should watch it as well. Leave a comment down below. Should I call these recommendations or reviews? And if they are recommendations, what would you like me to recommend? And if they're reviews, what would you like me to review next? Moving on to the review of the day. Today, I want to talk to you about this, I think, Australian show that came out recently on Netflix. It's called Heartbreak High, and it is wonderful. It is one of those shows that I can recommend to almost everybody. In fact, I will recommend the show for everybody under the age of 45. And before I say anything about the show, yes, I know a lot of people are going to start comparing this to Euphoria, and please don't. Okay, trust me, don't compare this show to Euphoria. Euphoria is an entirely different show that has similar ideas behind it, but not particularly the same. In the case of Heartbreak High, the story, the plot points, the setup are quite different from the ones that you would have seen prior to this. When I actually saw the show for the first time, I was like, oh great, another teen drama. What can they do differently this time? I was immensely wrong. I was incredibly wrong. I was wrong to the point where I was hooked onto the show, and I finished the show in probably a day and a half, despite it being quite a lengthy show. But the story was so incredibly gripping. There were so many twists, there were so many things that kept me intrigued from the beginning to the end that I wanted to know what was happening next. And that is probably the biggest selling point for the show, the story of the show and how gripping it is. Each character and each actor, their performances within that story, within that narrative is brilliant. They're performing out of their skin so that they can actually create a show that is lovable, that you can get behind. Saying that the characters are well written and the actors do well is not the only reason why I love watching this show. The story is why I love watching the show. Now, the opening sequence itself is about a girl who's bleeding from her nose and sitting and talking about her best friend and how they're not talking to each other, and that's the hook for the show. And you're immediately going, okay, I want to know more about this girl and I want to know what happened to them. And by the time you finish the first episode, you're already so interested in the rest of the show that you want to actually develop a bond with the characters. You want to know more about the characters. You're interested in each of the characters' story. Quite honestly, I've seen so many shows at this point that I'm just like, yeah, but this has been done here better. But that's not the case with Heartbreak High. Heartbreak High does this really well. The reason why I was so interested in knowing more about Heartbreak High is because of how different the setup for Heartbreak High was from the other shows that I've seen. There are multiple English language series out there, and most of them predominantly come from either the UK or from the US, but not a lot of English language shows that I have seen being recommended, especially on my Netflix and Amazon Prime, actually come from the Australian culture, especially the modern Australian culture. There was this one other show that I saw that was made in Australia that's called Please Like Me, and I think I will do a review on Please Like Me very soon because I think that show deserves a video in itself. Now, coming back to Heartbreak High, and the reason why the story is so gripping is because, well, it's about friends. It's about what happens, what conspired between these two friends, and all the trials and tribulations of these two particular friends. What happens is, in a story like this, because it's been done so many times, there are a certain number of cliches that set in, a certain amount of expectations from a show that set in. They use the cliches to their advantage, and when they actually bring up a cliche, there's something surprising about the cliche in itself. Now, I'm not going to spoil too much of the story. I want to give you an idea of why the show works, which is the story is gripping. The character arcs from the beginning, like from the first episode, you're intrigued about each character and you want to know where this character actually ends up going. And what happens in shows sometimes is the creators lose sight of what their end goal is. A very good example of how good character arcs actually pay off, apart from Heartbreak High in itself, is Stranger Things. And Stranger Things 4, there were a lot of things that you just sit there and go, okay, it's a very long episode. Do I really have to sit through it? But then you don't realize how long the episode is once you start watching it, because there are a lot of character payoffs. There, the arcs are so well written that you're actually invested in each character, and that is why I actually recommend Stranger Things, because it's very well written and they have a certain idea that is already in place, and they know it's going to last only that much time. That also applies to Heartbreak High, and they already have a set story for season 1. The payoff for each characters is done within that set character arcs, and you want to know what happens to each of the character arcs, and once they end, you're automatically thinking about what they're going to do next. That is a very good way of ending a season. I also want to talk about how each character and how each actor actually created their characters, and how each character felt real, and how each of the actors did justice to the characters. Because a lot of times you just put in an actor for a character and they're just going to play themselves. I know I'm gonna get a lot of flag for that comment, but come on, dude. Like, I mean, you look at Dwayne Johnson's films, each of his films is basically Dwayne Johnson being Dwayne Johnson. You look at Ryan Reynolds, most of his characters are more or less the same, just that his choices with films is different. But for me, if a character is thrown at an actor, how does the actor actually make the character his own, and how the actor is basically fitting into the role of that character is what intrigues me the most about, well, almost anything. So in that sense, I feel that this particular show does a very good job in picking their actors right. In fact, I think there were a couple of actors that were there in the original cast that were played again. So that was a very smart thing to show. Yeah, okay, I didn't mention this earlier, but Heartbreak High is actually a remake or a reboot of an older Australian show. A lot of these shows, they are offbeat shows. Like Heartbreak High is not something that a lot of people are going to be talking about. Heartbreak High is not mainstream media is going to cover. Not a lot of people are going to hear about this show, which is why I really wanted to talk about this show, because I feel that almost every good show deserves to be spoken about, and in fact every good show deserves its screen time. It deserves to be spoken about and does not deserve to be cancelled before its due diligence is done. And there's one show that I feel really sad about that was cancelled before it could actually complete the story, and it's One Day at a Time. I feel so sad that that show never got the kind of recognition that it should have. Character arcs, the character performances, the actors' performances, and the story are all the reasons why I love this show. And the final thing that I really want to talk about is it kind of introduced me to a different culture altogether. I haven't read up a lot about the Australian culture. I haven't read up a lot about multiple cultures. There are some cultures that I've read about. There are cultures that I know about like the back of my hand. But there are cultures that I have absolutely no idea about. And one thing that I have to credit the show for is it actually got me interested in the culture that they were representing, which is interesting to say the least. And I know it's not something that will probably be very interested about, or maybe I won't fit into that culture, but at least I do know about the culture. So that's something that I found really interesting. Overall, I would highly recommend that you watch the show, and if you did watch the show, please leave a comment as to why you loved the show or didn't like the show, and what your opinions are about the show. Peace. That's me in my time, and see you in the next one really soon.